Mr. Smalley, do you believe that abortion is moral?
Oh, boy. I'm glad I'm debating him instead of you.
This is Apologetics Live. To answer your questions, your host from Striving for Eternity Ministries, Andrew Rappaport.
We are live, Apologetics Live, here to answer your most challenging questions you have about God and the Bible. One of those questions we're going to deal with tonight, and that is a question of full preterism. Let me bring in my co-host, Mr. Drew. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, How are you?
Good. I am feeling sick. So, as I told you, I will probably, take myself off camera as I cough and sneeze and everything else.
Yeah. Is that why you're wearing that sweater? It's so you can wipe your nose and
no, my bride made me this sweater. I will not do that.
Oh, okay.
I didn't do that.
It looks nice.
It is. She made it when we went to a cruise to Alaska at our 10th wedding anniversary, and I'm finally wearing it 20 years later because she made it and she kind of just guessed how long my arms were. So it would go like this. My fingers would stick out like this. So she was always like, I should fix that. So she did. She actually took the time to take the shoulders off and take it out. But I like it. Looks nice.
Yeah, you got to love a good sweater.
Yeah. So before we introduce our guest and the show we have, I told you I may or may not be making a big announcement here, but
that's right. Yeah, shocking one too.
Yeah. I'm going to have to admit, man, if there's ever been a case, I must be post-mill. I mean, Donald Trump got elected and everything is good in the last 9 days. I mean,
that's right. Look at everything he's doing, everything that's happening.
If there was ever an argument for post-mill, it would be what's going on right now, because I'm seeing things I never expected would be happening, especially in America.
Apparently, RFK Jr. went from supporting abortion, full-term abortion, to now
every abortion's wrong.
Every abortion's wrong. So,
I mean, we're saying. I mean, you're now saying, hey, you're a really bad criminal. What? You're here illegally? Okay, we'll ship you to Guantanamo. Your country doesn't want you back? We got a place for you.
Yep, that's right. We do.
I mean, excuse me. Yeah. I am, as much as I thought Trump might do as president. Wow. He's done more in 9 days or 10 days now.
Yeah.
Well, than Joe Biden did like his entire 4 years.
All 50 years he's been in elected.
Maybe all 50 years, 60 years in Congress, or Senate. So let me bring in Dr. Sam Frost. So let me explain how we got around to this topic of full preterism, and then I'm going to let Dr. Frost introduce himself and see why he is in here for this. And this is an appeal to any of you Twitter followers that were there wanting to tell me how, full preterism cannot be disputed. Now is your chance to come in and prove to us how unrefutable your position really is. Mm-hmm. This episode started because, and Sam, you've been here before, but we did have, I put out a post, innocent enough. I just asked people their views, mill, post-mill, pre-mill.
This is probably the least controversial post Andrew has ever put out.
I didn't make any claims. I just asked everyone their view, right? Simple enough. The full preterists came in groups. And I kind of, Drew, I've dealt with the Black Hebrew Israelites, and I've taught how to deal with them and how they do that group think where they never come in one at a time. They come in a bunch at a time and feed off each other. Yep. And ignore what you say because they're just really talking to each other and then going, yeah, that's right. You said it. You got them. And they don't actually listen to what you're saying. Well, that's what went on in my poll there. And I kept asking them, as I always do for folks, to say, would you come on to Apologetics Live? Let's debate it. I said, if you guys, because they were telling me it was undeniable unrefutable. And I said, well, then you should have no problem coming in and doing a debate. And they kept, several of them all appealed and tagged some guy, Michael Sullivan, which I know, Sam, you said you know who he is. And I said, okay. And as Michael came in, all of them backed away and said, oh, Michael can handle it. Okay. So what ended up happening was Michael says he's willing to do it. I said, great. I've reached out to Sam Frost and he'd be happy to debate you. To which he was like, oh no, that guy's running from 2 debates from me already. He can't handle answering his own book. He's running from me. Therefore, I'm not going to do it. And then a bunch of people said how Michael agreed to debate and that Sam is running from him. I said, look, on this thread, I only see one person who's running, and it's not Sam, because he's not even in the thread. To which hours later, when I told Sam about this, he went onto the thread and said, I'm willing to debate you. So the record's out there, right? Which I thought was
nothing to see here.
It was the classic troll move. I mean, if Sam Frost ever did a Donald Trump move, there it was.
Yeah.
Just to get it right out the thing and say, I'm here, I'll debate you. So it was funny because this guy, Michael Sullivan, and I could see, Sam, why he's afraid to debate you. Because basically he remember, all I did was ask people, what is their view? A-mill, post-mill, pre-mill. And he told me, and for regular listeners, you'll get the humor in this. He told me I need to defend amillennialism. To which I said, why? And he said, because you made the claim, you have to support it. I said, all I did was ask what people's position is in a poll.
Yeah.
He says, no, you're a-mill. To which I said, no,
No, you're not.
I said, if you're really good at debating, you should learn the first thing is to know your opponent. I'm not a-mill. To which this one woman who kept telling me she's willing to have a written debate, which I told her I wouldn't. Written debates are not good because people, like as she was doing, just ignore what I'm saying, and you can't do that when you're actually like in person. And so she posts in a response to this guy, Michael Sullivan. She actually, I mean, this is just classic. She posts a link to our doctrinal statement at Striving for Eternity and claims he's not a-mill. I read his doctrinal statement. He's post-mill.
Two out of 3 is not good.
You think they could get one of them.
I know you're pre-mill, and I'm like,
yeah.
You got one more guess.
So somebody else was finally responding and said, because she said she read it. And someone said, he's pre-mill?
That's it. You finally got, out of the 3, the last one you got right.
Yeah. Well, that was someone else that's not a full preterist. So 2 full preterists got it wrong.
Yeah.
And so it was just hilarious because she said she read it. And she was like, she told me I was running from a written debate from her. I said, and my response was, as a woman, you shouldn't be teaching the Bible. So I would never have agreed to a written debate with you. So you should repent of both teaching men and your false teaching of full preterism. Mm-hmm. So
that shows you the competence and reading level of a good deal of full preterists.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I played the intro that we did with David Smalley, where he didn't want to debate me. He'd rather debate Matt Slick over me. Well, I guess, Sam, all the full preterists are here backstage that wanted to debate you. I'll bring them all in right now.
Crickets.
You see them all? Oh, okay. I should have done the thing that I did for the.
I'm disappointed.
It's undeniable, but they're all afraid. You can't defend yourself, but none of them are here. Funny how that works. And so, Sam, you probably don't know I did this, but many years ago, we had Black Hebrew Israelites that kept telling me they would debate me, but they would never show up here. Mm-hmm. And so we actually had one scheduled. It was going to be me against 3 Black Hebrew Israelites. And like Tuesday, so the show's on Thursday, Tuesday, they all blocked me and the moderator. So we couldn't give them the link, which then they went around saying that we wouldn't provide the link because we were scared. And so on the show, we announced, they blocked us and we can't provide a link to. So I told the moderator, I said, look, here, let's have a debate. Just do a debate. Introduce me. I'll do the opening. Introduce the Black Hebrew Israelites. He's like, who are you going to have? They blocked us. I said, just do it. He had no idea what I was going to do. So I do my opening. He said, we're going to have the Black Hebrew Israelites that are going to debate Andrew here. They're going to introduce themselves. And I threw up a picture of an empty chair.
Yeah.
Classic.
Just in
I
case.
done that here. So Sam,
The empty chair for Elijah.
yeah, that's for Passover. That's correct.
Oh, yeah.
So introduce yourself so folks know. I mean, first off, introduce who you are. Let's give a high-level overview of full preterism, what it is for folks that may not know, and then explain why it is that you'd be here because, I love he bows down so we can see the rest of his books. As I am selling,
It's like never ending.
I'm selling my library,
Hold on.
and it's so hard to do. And I get this. I've told him before the show I want to come to his house and just get down there to see that library. It just goes on and on and on.
It's not all it's my two boys. One's works at the state capitol here in Indianapolis, but he's a poli-sci major, and then my other one, he's in Indiana University, and they grew up with me, so they buy books just like I do, and they didn't have any place for them, so they end up downstairs here at the house.
And they become your books.
I keep building and adding shelves and going around the corner and everything, so we just can't bring ourselves, to get rid of them. But they're all top tier reference and specific, nonfiction kind of works that we look for, handpicked, just very specific.
Right.
You can't buy everything. But the popular,
though we want to,
the popular stuff we get rid of and just focus in on the more impactful kind of. Well, like this one. This one was just sent to me as a gift. Oxford Handbook on the Book of Revelation by Kessler. And I was wanting to get this, very expensive, and someone sent it to me as a gift. Elton Holland, who thank you, Elton.
nice.
I can't wait to dive into this thing. I just got this yesterday.
I need friends like yours.
People send me stuff. So after a few years, you amass a collection of books.
The only thing Drew ever sends me is bills.
Huh?
The only thing Drew ever sends me is his bills.
Oh, Bill, yeah.
I need someone to pay him,
So full preterism, well, people have said, some of your debaters probably on Twitter. I just got asked this by a Phil Jones on Facebook of how familiar am I with full preterism in order to debunk it. Well, I'm pretty familiar. This is Misplaced Hope. I wrote that in 2003 as a full preterist. This was one of mine that sold thousands of copies of this one. Tim King and Max King put that one out, and then I wrote this one, Exegetical Essays. This got sold out, and I republished it. Don Preston, who is bar none the most prolific full preterist author out there, he now publishes this book. I've asked him not to, but he continues to publish it. He says it continues to sell as one of the best full preterist books ever written. If that tells you anything, that I don't understand full preterism, but I can easily debunk that because Don Preston sells this book still to this day, even though I've renounced full preterism. And then you mentioned Michael Sullivan, and there I am, and there's Michael Sullivan, and I co-wrote the book with him, House Divided. Now, when I left, of course, they had to take my name and chapter out, but there it is. And so those are the three works that I have that I participated and spoke at over 25 lectures across the United States from 2003, 2008. Had one of the very few full preterist acting churches, which we founded and pastored in St. Petersburg Christ Covenant Church, and was producing a lot of CDs and materials and pamphlets and booklets and things of that nature. I, sold my life to it. This was I knew Max King personally and Tim King, and I know Don Preston personally and Ed Stevens personally, and I met Jack Scott and William Bell and all these guys. We roomed together. David Curtis. We personally would, fellowship together in hotel rooms and hotel lobbies and conference hall lobbies and things of that nature. So I got to know these guys pretty well. And listen, a lot of these guys are nice, American, they're nice guys, guys you wouldn't mind you needed some help or whatever. But the theology of it, of full preterism, which basically is that every prophecy that's in the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation is exhaustively fulfilled by the time of 70 AD, the 9th of Av. Which would be what in the Jewish would be August 9th. So by that time, all the prophecies from Genesis to Revelation are all exhaustively fulfilled by that time. And so after that time, there's no prophecy left in any way, shape, or form to be fulfilled in our future at all. And that's the full preterist, or what I call the hyper preterist view. That's basically the view. So that would be the declarative statement, or the statement of what it is they believe. All prophecy is fulfilled by the time of 70 AD. And then, of course, the flood of questions, if you've been raised in a church or you've been in church for a few years, and like all things church, what about the resurrection? What about the new heavens and new earth? What about, these are just immediate questions that will come up. And so, what about the resurrection? Well, what about the resurrection? What about church history, the early church fathers? And what about the inconsistencies of views that are out there already? So we covered all that. And looking back on it, it increasingly became more difficult because these questions, like we'll take the word death. Death now is entirely, totally divorced from what you and I know as just, death. The funerals, cemeteries, getting ill, getting cancer, people in our families, in our lives that we're going through, what we're heading towards. That's not what the Bible's talking about. The Bible's talking about spiritual death. So you got to get around all that stuff. Go ahead. That topic alone would take 2 hours to discuss.
Yeah, so they kept making an issue over death.
Yeah, death is a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah, and I didn't know that they make a big deal, like that. Because I asked them, what is death, and I couldn't get a definition from any of them.
Yeah.
In my view, death is separation, right? Physical death is separation of the spirit from the body. Spiritual death is our separation of a fellowship with God, and eternal death is a permanent separation. So they all have the idea of separation, but they kept using it, and they kept using it in a way because I kept bringing up Daniel 9, which we'll get to, the 70 weeks of Daniel. But Drew, you had a really interesting point that you had when we talked about this, of because as Sam just mentioned, right? They believe all prophecies are done in 70 AD.
Yeah.
I know you're a post mill, so you're close to the truth, but you're not there yet as a pre mill.
We got a pre mill, an all mill, and a post mill on this show. That's amazing.
Yeah, and we all think we're the right ones.
Yeah,
we're gonna find out who's right one day, but yeah, you had an interesting point though with the prophecies that you would really like to see the full preterists say when it happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe Sam could explain when that happened from a full preterist view, but why don't you get into that?
Yeah. So the one thing that I mentioned with Andrew is how when Jesus talks about his coming, he talks about he will come back as you saw him go, right? And so we would look at that and we would say, okay, so that's a bodily return, right?
Yep.
Now, as a post mill, right? And we, me and a couple buddies, we even did a show on Apologetics Live where we talked about Jesus's coming in 70 AD was a judgment, but that's not his second coming. That's not what Jesus means when he talks about his second coming. So when Jesus says he will return, right? And what he's saying there is in the same way he went bodily. And so they saw him bodily. So therefore he must return bodily. How do they get around that?
And what's interesting there is, especially among some Baptist confessions or statements of faith, you see, and do you believe in the visible bodily? And they put that word bodily in there. You believe in the visible bodily return of the Lord.
Mm-hmm,
I always wondered years, where did that word bodily, when did that get inserted? Well, the reason why it's inserted in there is because he ascended bodily.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, logically, he will return bodily in the same body.
Right.
That's perfectly natural, logical to think that.
Mm-hmm.
What the full preterists do is that the Jesus is going up in a cloud, is that his body at that point is transformed, absorbed, loses any of its human attributes, qualities, quantity, and is,
that's really
explanations begin because. So if you ask like Larry Siegel, who's been in this for 30 some years, like Larry is an old friend of mine, but he's a full preterist. And he traveled around with Jack Scott and Don Preston and all these guys. So he really knows full preterism backwards and forwards, and he's a full preterist. So he says beyond that, we can only speculate, but we cannot reason that Jesus retained his body, whereas the logic would seem to demand it unless I'm specifically told, oh, and by the way, he no longer retains his body. So the statement, do you believe in the visible bodily, is because that's just a logical, it's deduced. If he ascended bodily, his descent will be bodily.
So
otherwise.
So
they don't have an explanation for it.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah.
because as a partial preterist, right, when Jesus is quoting Daniel and he talks about the Son of Man coming up to the Ancient of Days, right, we would view that as his ascension.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And so if he's coming up to the Ancient of Days, he's sitting on the throne. The Lord is making the earth his footstool. Right. All that's implicated there is bodily functions, right? They're seeing him bodily. He's coming up bodily. Yep. And so how do they get around that? Because I'm sure they believe the same about when Jesus quotes Daniel there.
The most likely answer I gave and that Don would give is that that's all vision. It's just visions. You can't take it literal. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Is that like the transfiguration that really didn't happen? They had a vision. So that's how you get around that. Because the word vision is there. Parao, that word in Greek, you can use that, and usually it's they saw it. They saw this.
Right.
They saw Elijah. They saw Moses. And knew who they were immediately. So I thought, well, that's a little glimpse of the new heavens and new earth right there. He's giving them a little glimpse of the glory to come. And then, now we're back into the here and now again. That's what I think is going on. And a lot of scholars think that's what the intention of the gospel stories are telling us, that he's giving them a little peek that I am the Daniel, son of man. All glory, power, and judgment is mine. Moses and Elijah are at my right and my left hand. I'm the supreme. This is the reality, but don't tell anybody this yet. Now's not the time. So, but they get around all of that because it's all just visionary, and therefore it's not actual, it's not real. And so that's beyond that. There really isn't any other explanation in that, other than the necessity that they have to do that because you can't have Jesus in a human body as we speak right now at the right hand of the Father, which in Orthodoxy we retain that bodily, yes. In our systematic theologies, Charles Hodge, you can go down the list.
I mean, he has to.
Jesus, the human being, retains space, location, in the heavenly dimensions at the right hand of the Father as a human being, as we shall also in heaven and on earth in the new heavens and new earth. So that's resurrection. They've got to get away from all that language, because if Jesus ascended bodily and is now, as we speak, bodily the man Christ Jesus, Jesus of Nazareth, well, the whole house of cards comes falling down.
Mhm.
So I wrote an article a long time ago saying we got to get rid of the body, using a Sopranos line,
Yeah.
or Goodfellas or whoever, we got to hide the body.
Right.
And they do. They have to do that.
Well, and that's the thing that I kind of noticed when talking with them, is that it just seemed like so much of what I was hearing was just redefinition of terms, which always concerns me.
Mhm.
Yep.
And an inconsistency between literal and spiritual, right? So it's they would just jump. Oh, well, that's literal, that's spiritual, within the same text, without any basic explanation from the text of why to take something literal or spiritual at different times. And that's the thing that really frustrated me in the discussion, because as someone that does debate, when we debate, we need to have a clear understanding of the definition of terms that we agree to.
Are you familiar with, I'm seeing this movement. I don't know how big it is. I'm just seeing it in passing through the other things I'm reading. There's this movement among Mormons, the more educated or intellectual defenders of Mormonism, that are trying to move in and to show how Mormons are actually can dialogue and are at home with evangelicalism, and they're that we share the same kind of vocabulary, and they're kind of wanting to join in with the evangelical concern. And I'm like, this is interesting, because that's exactly what full preterism is trying to do, is that they're trying to show, we all have the same kind of definitions. We have differences and this, that, and the other. And it's that blurring of terms. And to somebody who's not spent 30 years like myself or you, on the surface, and I appreciate that you mentioned that in the beginning, on the surface, yes, that can be very confusing. That's where they pray at. Certainly.
Yeah. So the book that kind of started that dialogue was a book called How Wide the Divide, where they had a Mormon and an evangelical get together. And when you read
that is going on then.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
right.
unfortunately, there what you had was more of the evangelical caving on his views to say, look, we can agree with Mormonism. The thing, though, that a really interesting thing that I see, you look at the Catholic Church, which said that when we believed in salvation by faith alone, in Christ alone, right, grace alone, that was anathema. That belief in justification by Christ alone sentenced you to hell. That's what they said. Now they're trying to say, well, we're Christians too. There's no difference, right? Yeah. You had the same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses, with the Mormons, right? They say we're the false religion. Now they're trying to say, but we're Christians just like you. Wait, you can't have it both ways. You can't be like in Mormonism where, well, the gospel message fell away, but they have the restored gospel in the Mormon church. Well, then we don't have a restored gospel in Christianity, right? Yeah. We have a false gospel. And they're saying, but they're Christian too? No.
I noticed a lot of these, like Seventh-day Adventism, who my stepfather was Seventh-day Adventist, but he had, grown away a little bit from it. But there's this, and I'm pretty ecumenical when it comes to God will sort it all out in the end kind of thing. But there are these movements, to get away from Ellen G. White, you get away, that prophet, she was a prophetess, and get away from it. And so that is going on in Mormonism. Get away from the Josephs, try to get away from it. But that's your roots. I mean, so for me, Max King, full preterism, Max King, who is a universalist, may he rest in peace. He passed away last year. So, but the continuing ministry, living presence of Max King, who is, I consider, the father of modern full preterism today. Don Preston and Ed Stevens and all these guys came after him. but he became a universalist, and I'm like, that's your main guy right there. And they a lot of people in full preterism are trying to distance from Max King, from Don Preston. They're trying to create another evangelical quasi, we're all in the same camp kind of a thing. Like, so we have a premillennialist, an amillennialist, and a postmillennialist, which I would consider in the same camp, because we affirm the fundamental bodily return, bodily resurrection, new heavens and new earth. All of those fundamental things we all agree on. We have some details of how we're going to get there, but we all affirm those kinds of fundamental core basic structures of church theology and systematic theology. Whether you're Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Protestant, those have been the structures that have confined. So when you take that main block out, new heavens, new earth, resurrection of the dead, return of Christ, end of history, and you throw it back here in 70 AD, you're left out now in just this wide open world of what happens now?
Yeah, and that's one of the questions I kind of asked one of them. I said, so if all the prophecies fulfilled, like, why are we still here on earth? Like how do I get it? Like, what's God's plan here? Let me just put up some comments that Drew starred, and so we could some people giving some shout outs to you. We have Haps Addison, who just said Sam Frost rocks. So there you go. But that is Haps. So well, he's if there was ever any proof of Bigfoot, that's it right there. All right. So Standing for Truth says Dr. Sam Frost is the man. And so we have I don't know who this is because he didn't use a real name, but Shroud 8953 says Dr. Sam Frost, exclamation point. God bless you for taking the time after all these years to help people grow in grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah. So we got Caleb Gordon says total full preterism is full-blown heresy. By the way, encourage everyone to go check out Caleb Gordon's I guess it was Twitter, Facebook, whichever. I think he might have done both. But and Caleb should come in here so he could announce that his bluff was called. But Caleb Gordon has got a conference, and you can go to calebgordon.org for the details of the conference that we're going to be at. It's going to be it's the Built to Conquer conference. So calebgordon.org is where you get the tickets. But it's going to be on February 22nd in Bartsville, Oklahoma. So Caleb, we're coming there. It'll be we got Caleb Gordon will be speaking. I'll be speaking. Brandon Scalf. If you haven't heard him, you want to come just for that. Michael Stanton, Gabe Wrench, Brett Baggett, some great speakers. But here's the thing. I said to Caleb Gordon that, if I come to the conference, would he jump into a cold plunge? And he was like, yeah, man, you get a cold plunge down here. You find a place for us to do a cold plunge and I'll do it. Okay. Well, today he posted a video because I called his bluff and sent a cold plunge down to his house. So wow. he's got the cold plunge, and we're going to see how many of the speakers get into the cold plunge. It'll be a great time. We have let's see, what are their comments? So Chance Summers says, "What's up, guys?" And if you don't know Chance is from 1689 Cigars, and I think in the topic of full preterism, Chance might have a cigar name that would fit with these folks. It's his flavored cigar brand called the Pharisees. So maybe that's what they should be smoking if they were to get some 16.
What have you been smoking?
Yeah. Claude Ramsey, who is a great brother in the Lord, says, Sam, thank you for being steadfast in faith. I love you in the Lord and appreciate your ministry. Then we have this. This is kind of an interesting one. We have Apologetics dog. He
was supposed to be on here.
Yeah, he's commenting and online and on YouTube saying, excellent conversation, fellas. but he's supposed to be here, folks.
Yeah.
Was supposed to be here. We do hope on top of the hour when he puts his child to bed. His wife is sick, so be praying for them.
We'll set him up a debate. We'll get him to debate Mike Sullivan.
Yeah. So Claude also said, "Doing good. I glean wisdom from Dr. Frost." So a question that came in, and it came in from our a pre-mill in the house, but this is from Michael, a guy who's local to me here in Philly. He says, "Do all in the camp deny a future 1,000-year kingdom on Earth?"
I'll do you one better. The 1,000 years is symbolic of the time from the ascension of Jesus, which we'll say 33 AD, to 70 AD. And in between that time is John's symbolic 1,000 years. I'm going to let that stay right there. You heard it. You heard it from me. I'm not making this up. I used to I wrote a paper when I was a full preterist on this because I was really. So here's the gist. Okay, so 1,000 years is clearly a nice round, symbolic number, even among premillennialists, or John Walvoord or whoever you read. They recognize that yes, it's not going to be 365 actually, right down to the exact, and then at that second, it's going to tick off. So, but it's this nice indefinite round period of time. It's a symbol that's found in scriptures when 1,000 is used. 1,000, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. You've heard all this, to the 1,000th generation and 1,000. So 1,000 is this nice symbol for this long indefinite period of time or a large number. And so that's whether you're amillennial, premillennial, postmillennial, you can wrap your head around that and say, yeah, okay, yeah. So here's the argument. Since it is a symbolic number, then it could be 37 years or, 2,000 years or 3,175 years or whatever it could be. So the symbol, but the problem there is that the symbol 1,000 is never found anywhere where the actuality of the time that it's standing for as a metaphor or as a symbol is never reduced or less than. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that would break down on the metaphor. So if you're amillennial, 1,000 years can be a much larger actual period of time, 1,900 years and counting, or postmillennialism, 1,900 years or counting, or even in premillennialism, it could go over 1,000. Actual quantitative 1,000 years it could go over that, whatever. But the preterist shrinks the actual number that the 1,000 is representing. They shrink it to, what is that? 33 to 70 would be 37 years. So it actually means only 37 years. Now, if you clearly see, let me say this too, and I want you guys to comment, because when I wrote my article on this, and I was really like, we got a big giant, this is probably one of the biggest hurdles next to resurrection of the dead. This one would be the hurdle. This is the big one. After you buy into all of the time text and buy into all of this generation, and you buy into all of the old covenant ended in 70 AD, bring in the Josephus, you bring in and you have this whole nice built kind of thing going on here. And then you read Revelation 20, you're forced into that consideration. Could you ever teach full preterism and start at Revelation 20? Absolutely not. Could you teach full preterism by starting in 1 Corinthians 15? No. Don Preston and I would agree. We talked on the phone. It's like, no, we got to start at Matthew 24, Mark 13. We got to start with those and once we whittle that away and show that all these things must take place within this particular period of time, then naturally you're going to assume or deduce from this thing that we've built here, then you're going to deduce, well, the millennium has to fit in there. And you're like, well, yeah, it has to. And so it's not going to be really a problem there once you've done that. But if you're coming in from the outside looking at full preterism and you hear that the 1,000 years is from 33 to 70 AD. And I've said this to people. I travel a lot of churches and Nazarenes and Baptists and Presbyterians and all this stuff. And they asked this and they said, that's like the deal breaker for them right there. And they don't want to hear anymore. It's like, that's insane. How do they do that? Well, you've got to buy into the system first in order to do that, because you'll never get that out of Revelation 20. Whether you're millennial or premillennial, you'll never get that out of there. So.
That was the thing I kept struggling with the folks. I said, look, I kept going to Daniel, the 70 weeks of Daniel. And I said, it's just math, right? I would ask them, okay, so you got 77-year periods. Were the first 69 fulfilled literally? And they agree. I said, okay, so the last 7-year period, how do you get, whether you want to say that it started when Jesus started his ministry, or you want to say that was, started at his death, you're still talking 33 plus 7. How do you get 70 AD?
Well, there's a gap.
Yeah, well, no, because that was the whole thing, is they were telling me that I can't have a gap as a premillennialist to say like that was the irony, is like they tried to argue for a gap and then argued that I can't have the gap.
Yeah.
It was like, wait, you can have, like, it just was hysterical, because so in Daniel chapter 9, I was going to go here later, but let me just bring it up. This is for folks that might want to look it up. Daniel 9:24-27. What you see is this prophecy given to Daniel of 7 7-year periods. It's actually not weeks in Hebrew. It's 7 sevens. Okay. He gives here some very specific things that will happen at the end of the 70th week. He says in verse 24 that when the weeks have been decreed, your people and your holy city to finish the transgressions, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness, to seal up visions and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So there are several things there there's 6 things there that should take place, right? Mm-hmm. So he talks about in verse 25, you see chronological language, right? 7 weeks and 62 weeks for the decree to rebuild, for the of the building of the temple, and then of a completed period. And it says, verse 26, then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off. So we know that Messiah comes after that second period. So there's a 7-week period, a 62-week period, a 1-week period. And so, I'm going, okay, so you're saying the 62 weeks occurs with Christ being cut off. That's his death. And I go, okay.
They would take that.
Yeah. So I go, okay, so let's add 7 to 33. If he died in 33, 7 years later would be 40 AD, not 70 AD. I'm like, help me understand the math.
Yeah. And, well, and let me say this, because I differ a little. I wrote my commentary on Daniel, where I worked through translation, and then I, had that published and stuff. So I would take a little bit different. I'm more of the, even though I'm staunch conservative, I kind of side more on the James Charlesworth and the liberal side. I guess what you'd call the liberal side but that's neither here nor there. The only reason I bring that up is because they'll use that between me and you, and they'll say, see, you guys disagree on yeah, great. We all disagree on it, but the fundamentals, again, I come back to the fundamentals. But in their case, where they do take what it is that you're saying, that's how they calculate that. They end up with this gap. You can't avoid it. Don Preston went kicking and screaming, trying to do everything he could to get the math to work out, and then finally came to the conclusion, that there was a gap, because we would always make fun of the dispensationalists because they have the gap thing going on.
That's right.
One of the strengths of our full preterist argument is that we have no gap. Well, lo and behold, you do.
Well, what they would do is, the way they explained it, they gave me this paper to read, which basically said, like, yes, The first period of time, literal. The second period of time, literal. The third period of time, figurative.
Yeah.
And but what in the hermeneutics? There's got to be a reason that you suddenly
Then
change.
you know you got an agenda going on there.
Correct. Well, that's the thing I kept saying
Make
to
this thing work. Make this thing fit. It's a square peg going into a circle kind of thing. You know.
And you mentioned
We'll
this.
get it in there.
The starting point for them, it seems, is the ones I was debating with, is Matthew 24:34. Okay. And they start there and then try to read the rest of the Bible into that. That's the thing that I kept saying is it's a logical fallacy. They have a fallacy because you have to start with the conclusion, right? And so it's a begging the question fallacy. But let me read the passage I referenced, and that is, it says, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So they make a big emphasis, it seems, on this generation. So it had to have been 70 AD that all these things take place. And so they start with that. And one person even said, well, Jesus couldn't give a false prophecy, and this is a prophecy. Now, the debate is really over what is that generation? Yes. Right? Yep. Is that the generation that saw the things that we're that we're discussing here, or is it the generation that sees these signs, or is it the generation that's standing there before Christ? I will say this: if folks listen, one of the other podcasts we have in the Christian podcast community is called Bible Sojourner, and Pete Gaiman, who's a seminary professor of Old Testament, went into recently an episode dealing with this. With this verse and showing how the passage here is a future tense, and so it wouldn't have had to been fulfilled in 70 AD. It could have been.
He didn't necessarily do that. He said, "This is why I think it's future tense," but he gave other possibilities as well.
Correct. Yeah.
But the thing is
millennial partial preterist, and I'm pointing to the screens as I see them. And you're So you two figure that out. So this generation, that phrase, there's a wealth of literature. There's a wealth of literature on it, and many of the arguments are very. They have their strengths, weaknesses. The contemporary idea, that has a lot of strengths to it just because of the usage of it. This generation, he's obviously contemporary speaking to. However, you go back to the Septuagint and you begin to look at this phrase, "this generation," which first occurs in the story of Noah, and there's a couple of other little phrases. So scholars like Ewald and other will note, particularly Deuteronomy, this generation. You have that phrasing there, and so can that mean brood of vipers, a generating people of vipers, this generation? And so Jesus is saying this generation will not pass away until all these things, meaning you're going to continue to put up with this kind of people until the end. Well, okay, it gets, regardless, there are multiple ways, I think, in my own work, in the Greek text, is showing that Jesus is, even if he is saying all these things, that's in the plural, all what things? Well, if you go to the beginning of Matthew, he tells you what all these things are: earthquakes, famines, persecution, hatred. The gospel will continued to be preached as a testimony. There'll be all these things. These are the beginning things. These are beginning birth pangs, tribulations, afflictions, earthquakes, financial disaster, all this kind of stuff. That generation see these things? Yes. But the end, that's separated off, but the end is not yet. So G.K. Beale, D.A. Carson, a few others understand that Jesus is saying, here's all these things, and they're going to continue until the end. Well, when is the end? Well, I'm not here to tell you that. So you have a definite period of time, rather than Jesus saying, oh, I'm going to return in this generation, which he never says. He never says that. I'm going to return in this generation. I'm going to raise the dead in this generation. He just says all these things will take place in this generation before this generation passes away. Well, what's going to come after this generation? Well, another generation. In other words, time's going to continue on. Even though I'm the king, I'm the Messiah, all power and judgment authority is given to me. I'm at the right hand of the Father. I fulfilled Psalm 2, Psalm 110, Psalm 16. All these Psalms are, yes, it's all speaking of me. But the tribulation, the famines, the earthquakes, wars, rumors of wars, those things are going to continue on. For how long? No man knows how long. So what do I got to do in the meantime? Be awake, be alert, suffer through, persevere, endure. Oh, that's relevant. Yeah, okay. So I think if you take, and even in the premillennial circles, you see that idea of alertness, readiness, that kind of thing. So, you know, it's an interesting debate. The only reason, I'm sorry to be long-winded, the only reason I bring it up is because here the full preterist will seize upon you two brothers and maybe some differences you have, and that's where we pounced. That's what this book right here is all about. And since you two guys debate on what this generation is, the full preterist has the answer. I wanted you to speak to that. So what do you do in spite of your differences, and yet you still have these fundamental kind of things? You know, that's as an apologist for full preterism, we seized on that right there as a weakness. Oh, you guys disagree. You're fighting. See, you guys don't even know what this means.
Yeah.
You know,
so
you condemn us, you know.
So I know Andrew's method is just to continually tell me I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
but no, so seriously, so even holding the position I do, the post-mill partial preterist, right? I would hold to the Ken Gentry's, Corbin's, those are positions that I hold to that I know don't necessarily affect my salvation. Now, if I were to deny the bodily return of Christ, then that would affect my salvation.
You wouldn't be on this show.
I wouldn't be on this show. Right?
You might be as someone we're debating.
Right. So those things don't affect my salvation, but I know even in Andrew's position, being the dispensational premillennialist, I know that those things don't necessarily affect his salvation either. And so we can have these discussions with one another, and we can come to different conclusions, and we can talk about the hermeneutical methodologies. We can look at how we arrive, find the consistencies, maybe the inconsistencies. But at the end of the day, we agree on a lot more than just eschatology. Right. We agree on the gospel. We agree on who Christ is. We agree on how you must come to know Christ. We agree on the bodily return of Christ. Right. Those are things that we agree on. And so because we agree on all those things, we can partner together, and I can lift up Andrew and encourage him. He lifts up me and he encourages me. I mean, I even when he was talking about Daniel, right, I did a thing on 2 years ago, maybe, on the 70 weeks, and I sent it to Andrew to say, hey, just listen to this, you know. I never got any feedback though, but we've talked about it several times at length.
2 years ago, no feedback.
You know,
well, no, hey, look. For the record, did I not let you come onto this show when I was not here and do a full show on your view?
That's true. We did do that, and you know, and that's another thing, right? So there's even holding the position I do, Andrew still trusts me enough to know that I can come on the show, I can act accordingly. I'm not going to undermine. Basically the feel of the show or the general belief foundation of the show, and so I have no problem with what Andrew believes. And
it's also that I can't hold to, and I think this is the thing people get a mistake of in end times, is we can't hold to it so tightly.
Yes,
saying we have absolute knowledge of the truth. We can do that with the first coming, because it's already been fulfilled and documented in Scripture.
Yeshua HaMashiach.
Yeah, we don't have it in the second coming, because when Christ came the first time, people missed it because they had their views and Jesus didn't fulfill what they expected. Now, if you're a full preterist, that means everything is fulfilled. So there shouldn't be any disagreement. We shouldn't be able to find anything that we could disagree on. Like we have to see it all having been fulfilled. And there's comments in, let me try to get to some of these, because there are some people that are raising things that would be interesting to see. And by the way, folks, I would encourage you guys, share this on social media right now, especially if you know any full preterists. Challenge them to come on in and refute us. I mean, they say their position's unrefutable.
Let me say this real quick, Andrew. Just to follow up,
I'm just doubting you could say anything real quick, but
that's true.
I'm more winded than you, so.
But Sam,
not bad.
So one of the things that I think benefits me and in my walk with Christ is my friendship with dispensational premillennialists like Andrew, like Justin, like Jim Osmond, because I know they're men that if I say something that may be getting a little off into the weeds, they'll confront me and they'll pull me back and they'll talk to me. And those are things that I need in my life, is men who have been around for a while that can recognize that they understand my position, but then they also recognize when I might be getting into something that's contrary to that's a heresy.
Yeah. And as a minister in Indiana, I'm surrounded by dispensational, but we love each other. We hold each other accountable, responsible, all of those kinds of things. When I see you floating in the weeds over there, but you're operating within bounds. So if I asked Andrew, do you believe in the bodily return and bodily resurrection of the dead? It's an absolute affirmative. I'm like, okay, then we can fight about the details or whatever, but whatever. As long as you affirm that, you're good. The full preterist, all that's off the table, every bit of it. And so I can't have a conversation with you because I don't know what you mean by dead, resurrection, death, body. I don't know what those terms mean. Now, I can talk to Andrew or you and mention the word body. I'm pretty much going to get a straight up definition. Of course, it's a no-brainer. The full preterist, it's the covenantal somatic body of the transitional change between the covenants. What?
Well,
what?
One of the things in my research on cults that I've always said is, cults have, and I'm not saying they're a cult, I'm just saying it's something that you see within the cult. But it could be, but I haven't done enough research to make that claim. But the issue being is, one thing I see consistent with the cults is a lack of integrity with language. They play fast and loose with the definition of words. And that is, I think it's necessary when you're dealing with cults, because they got to be able to make their system work. Well, like this, Lazarus said earlier. So 1,000 equals 40, according to full preterism. So I guess this is Lance. Some people knew who he was and called him Lance, but he's Lazarus.
That's his Orthodox name.
It's his what?
His Eastern Orthodox name. They give you different names.
So yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like all of a sudden 1,000 really means 40, right? To make it work. And 7 years equals 40 to make it work. So what they do is they start with the conclusion and then work it backwards. And that is not how you do any kind of honest, legitimate research. You don't start with the conclusion unless you're looking to be biased. Because when you start with your conclusion, there is a logical fallacy called confirmation bias. And when you start with your conclusion, you're more likely to fall into that because you're looking to prove your conclusion, which you started with, versus looking at the text and going through all the scripture to say, okay, does it teach this? That's a very different way of doing it. So it's the difference of eisegesis, exegesis. Eisegesis is reading it, meaning into the text. So you start with the conclusion, you're reading that in. Exegesis, you're pulling the meaning out. What the three of us here are doing is exegesis. We're pulling the meaning out of all these different passages. They're reading into it. How do we know that? Well, we just gave you the example. I mean, so 1,000 years equals 40, and 7 years equals 40. Like, the math doesn't work, right? So here's a civilly minded podcast. says, this is incredibly informative, and I am grateful for the clarification on a doctrinal fallacy I've rarely heard defended. Great panel, Andrew.
Oh,
So
preterism, yeah. Yeah, you don't hear. So they say that they're spreading and all of this, and we were always trying to latch on. That's why Don Preston latched on to me. I was doing my work at Reformed Theological Seminary, so I did 2 years Hebrew at Reformed Theological Seminary there in Orlando. And so, and a lot of the criticism coming out towards or against full preterism was coming from the Reformed crowd. So you had Keith Nathason's book, When Shall These Things Be?, where he gets Charles Hill and Simon Kistmacher and all of these guys out of Ken Gentry's, Richard Pratt. So he was getting these guys out of the Reformed that was criticizing full preterism. And I happened to be going to their schools. And some of these guys I knew. So being a full preterist, they latched on to me and say, hey, here's one of their guys. He's in their institutions, Whitfield Theological Seminary. Here's this guy. Because they're looking for any latching on to legitimacy, because there is none. There is no biblical scholar of merit that is a full preterist. They don't exist. Now you'll find preterists, you'll find that kind of stuff, but you will not find any body of a caliber of a Tom Wright or G.K. Bill or Carson or Kessler or any of these guys that eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff for 50 years. At home in the languages, several languages, and they're quite at home with them. These kinds of guys, and they've been, reading and writing on this, published, peer-reviewed, and all this kind of stuff going up for decades. You won't find anything like that that's full preterist. It's just not going to happen. You will find it in the amillennial world. You'll find a Bibliotheca Sacra. You'll find it in the premillennial Dallas Theological Seminary world. You'll find postmillennialism in the sky, but full preterism, it's not on the map. The reason why, and my colleagues and people that I've sent this out to over the years since I've left, they've read it and they just shake their head and they says, "No way." I would rather. And I'll say this, and you guys discuss it. So that you have this Bible believing, such as I am. Jesus is a failed prophet. Because in higher criticism or these critical schools, and I'll say Bart Ehrman as a good representative of that, Jesus did say he was going to come in that generation and all things would take place before you finish going through the cities of Israel. Some of you standing here will not taste death until the Son of Man comes in the power of his glory. So it certainly sounds like, however, that was written way after the fact. Jesus was a failed prophet. He may have originally, historically, had said such things. But then you've got this kind of cover-up redactionism going on that we've got to start adding this long period of time, because the first century and we're coming into the second century now, and there's been no return of Jesus. And so now you got a delay of the parousia that's going on and stretching out, and out of this, the church is born, and they have to scramble around. Why didn't Jesus say what he was going to say? Well, why didn't it happen when he said it was going to happen? That's that context that these discussions take place. And the full preterist answer to that is it did happen spiritually in 70 AD. That's their answer. Or Jesus is a failed prophet. That hooked me in. I can't have Jesus being a failed prophet. If that's the case, I'm done with church life is over. I'm done. It's like, I got other things to do.
That was the argument that one of them used with me, though, with that passage in Matthew, saying that Christ prophesied that the generation he was speaking to, but if you read I know this is a crazy idea when you read context, just back up a few verses, right? But what's he talking about? He says in verse 32, now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near, right? So he's giving you, okay, here's the signs of looking at a fig tree that summer's going to be near. so you too, when you see these things, recognize that he is near, right at the door. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So
I see what you're saying.
he's talking about signs, right?
Yep.
So it becomes a thing where it's the reality of what we have to do is look and say, is something a plausible interpretation of a text?
Yeah. Yep.
And we can't just reject it because it doesn't go with what we want it to say, right? And so we because if he's saying, if the generation is the one standing in front of Christ, this is their, I think it seems like their biggest argument they keep making, with me at least, was, see, then it had to have been fulfilled.
Well, I'd push back and say, some of you standing here will not taste death until you see the Son of Man. You know, that seems to be a pretty contemporary.
Well, I actually think that's an easy one, because the problem is that,
but you know,
well, the problem is that we put a chapter break right there, because if you look right after that, what happens? It says 8 days later, the transfiguration, where they saw those things.
Quite plausible to argue that.
It is. Right? It fits
right,
perfectly with the
right
context.
there, you know.
Yeah. So there were a couple passages to look at. Michael asked this one. He said, how does this relate to Zechariah?
They always bring up Zechariah.
Yeah. So let me bring up Zechariah 14:16. And he is a premillennialist, so you know that another word for that would be biblical.
Wait a minute.
I'd leave that out there.
I'm leaving.
But Zechariah 14:16
is translated and worked through that for many, many, many years, and it just boggles a lot of people. Both, it's the prophets were, I think, were just the prophets were just caught up in such an overwhelming revelation of the Spirit and an ecstatic, just overwhelming, and trying to use words to write down the end of just like what just happened to me. The genius of their writings is that we just keep coming back like, what is it? In other words, it's like it just keeps, it's like the word of God. It just keeps saying, come back and read me again. You think you got me figured out? Come back and read me again. And it's that word that invites, it draws us. And I think Jesus is doing that in John 6, the word, he's the word. And are you going to leave me too because of what I've said? Eat my flesh, drink my blood, which is incredibly shocking. And a lot of people left him when he said that, because that's just like, I can't take. But then Peter says, where else will we go? I don't understand what you're saying, but your words keep drawing me back in, and I want to understand, and I keep reading it, and I'm devoting myself to your word. And the prophets operate very much like that. So I love Zechariah 14, because it just keeps reading it, and you keep reading it, and you're like, man, this is amazing. What does he say? And it's frustrating too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing of it. This is the issue with future prophecy. There's some pieces and parts missing, and you're like,
well, I think the issue is when we're on the other side of it, it's going to be like, oh, that was crystal clear. Why did we miss this?
Yeah, right.
So Zechariah 14:16 says this: then it will come about that any who are left of all the nations that went out against Jerusalem will go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to celebrate the Feast of Booths. So I think what Michael's argument there, where he was saying is, well, it seems like if all the prophecy is over, then he has to be physically there reigning, for all the nations to come to him.
Thank you for mentioning that, because the full preterists will use that, and Don Preston will actually, let's see if you guys spot this. Don Preston and myself, we would argue that after the day of the Lord and after 70 AD. So after 70 AD, there's this continuation of evangelism and this, that, and the other, right? And we would symbolize the Festival of Booths as coming to Christ. So Christ is becoming our covering and all that. So we would do all that spiritualizing. However, if Zechariah is prophesying that after the day of the Lord, on this basis of interpretation, if he is saying that, then isn't that a prophecy that's ongoing and is not yet exhaustively fulfilled? If you have a continuation after 70 AD, that's a prophecy that's telling me after 70 AD what is being prophesied that's going to happen, then not all prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD.
Correct.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
And they fall on their own spear here. This was one of the reasons why I left, out of the many reasons. That was one of them. It's like you can't get around that. So now you've got this interesting group within full preterism called Israel only. And they literally believe that there is no evangelization after 70 AD. It was all fulfilled. The gospel was only meant to be preached to that generation, those nations, Gentiles, that got saved under Paul's ministry. And then that was fulfilled by 7. And then that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And
well,
but the evangelical full preterists like Don Preston, Mike Sullivan, they realize if they go that route, they've shot themselves in. You're never going to make an appeal to the evangelical world, which is what they want to do. They want at the same table. And so they have to have this, well, death is destroyed for those that are in Christ, but it's not destroyed for those that are not in Christ. So death is no more in the new heavens and new earth now for those that are in Christ, but death still, and I'm like, but Revelation says death is thrown into the lake of fire. You can't see where it starts. You can see where it starts falling apart there. It just, it starts falling apart because now you got to make stuff up. You got to make up these categories
but how do you also deal with the idea of sin and that sin is still here?
Well, the argument they made with me is that sin ended at the consequence of sin ended at the cross, and so therefore there is no sin anymore.
Right.
So and that's where I was frustrated because like, well, now you're redefining what sin is. That's not what was meant by it.
So hold on. So so we understand the idea of the consequence of sin ending once you come to faith in Christ, but that doesn't mean you stop sinning. So would they say that there is no more sin?
I ask my wife if I continue to.
right.
She just look at me like, what?
Yeah, but
I tell my wife that I don't sin, and she just gives me a look that she agrees. I think that's what that look means, right?
But then wouldn't
that's what that look means, right?
If there is, because if they're viewing that the consequence of sin is gone, as there is also no more sin, then wouldn't they be universalists then? Because then Max
King.
Yeah, we can't therefore be sinners then. So It doesn't matter what we believe, we go to heaven anyway.
Right. Because in Max King, who wrote the mammoth 800-page Cross and the Parousia of Christ, that is the Bible of full preterism, as far as I'm concerned. That's the book that got me in. That is the one. So he, in that book, was arguing along evangelical lines. But later on in his life, he wrote a book called Irrevocable, Romans 9-11, where he's universalist because death is destroyed for all. Redemption has come to the whole world. God has reconciled the entire world to himself. And so all are saved from Adam till whenever unfathomable end of history, sun burns out, the cosmos stops. Some 5 billion years from now, whatever, who knows?
It's so crazy.
Anyway, that's get along in your lives, love one another, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly.
If you have such an undeniable view, why do you have to play such games with words? I mean,
it's a complete paradigm shift. It's a total different way of thinking.
Yeah,
from everyday language. Yeah,
and folks, I'll remind folks. Share this out, especially if you know any full preterists that want to join. But there's no full preterists that have come in yet. But I do think it only fair to even up the sides here and bring in some more biblical views. So here's Aaron Brewster, a fellow premillennialist. So now at least we have a 50%. Aaron is one of the speakers at Striving for Eternity, and he is a regular guest host here.
To meet you, Aaron.
So,
I think Sam, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've been on the same show before.
Yeah, we've met.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, because you're seeming very familiar to me. I remember liking you. That's why I don't know if it was true or not. But
Aaron, were you at the pre-conference to the Why Calvinist conference? Did you make it to the pre-conference?
Yeah, that's where I met Andrew.
Yeah,
I think so.
I think if you were there, the pre-conference, Sam and
yes,
Jeremiah.
yes, I do
you.
remember that. Yeah, your hair was longer. Yeah, and I do remember. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other, we have a question here from the Apologetic Dog.
Jeremiah again.
And I think, don't you think we should ignore his questions and
Yes.
in here, because now that it's after his 2-year-old's bedtime, so he sends Sam and I a message saying, he can't come in until 9 Central Time because he's got to put his or 8 o'clock Central Time because he got to put his 2-year-old to bed because his wife is sick. And I basically said in there that, well, that's fine. Come in whenever you could, because Sam and I will just make fun of Jeremiah until he comes in. So
The show ends at 10. I'll be in at 9:55.
No,
Yeah.
Andrew, he's actually been in twice, because he's in under his YouTube and he's in under his Facebook as well.
Yeah. So he's watching on both.
Uh-huh.
So there you go. But I do think Jeremiah should come in here. But he does ask this question for you, Sam. He says, ask Sam about covenant creation full preterists. And so this is a term I'm unfamiliar with. So
Same.
what are they? Who are they? What do they
Who
believe?
are these people? Well, it's this book here, Beyond Creation Science and New Covenant Creation from Genesis to Revelation by Timothy Martin and Jeffrey Vaughn. And this book is endorsed by, in the endorsements, Don K. Preston, Walt Hibbard, Terry Hall, Virgil Viduva. Some of these guys go back a few years. They're no longer here. Jim Kessler, full preterist. Richard Duncan, full preterist. Norman Voss, who's a full preterist. Timothy King, Max King's son, who published my work. Jeremy Lyle, Michael Loomis, who has since gone completely AWOL. But anyway, that's this book here. So the book here, which I'm in this book. They quote me quite a bit because this was written back in 2005, and I was still full preterist. We were a lot of conferences, a lot of stuff going on. So I know Tim, I know Jeff, and we talked extensively. And I told them, I'm not going to go that route. But the basic thing is this: 2 Peter chapter 3 is 70 AD, right? So all that decreation language, heaven and earth passing and all that kind of stuff. And since that's 70 AD, which is obviously apocalyptic and symbolic language of the temple and the land in 70 AD, but yet the language is a cosmogenic language that's found in Genesis, right? Then the language of Genesis is also apocalyptic, metaphorical, symbolic language of the covenant creation of Israel. And so Israel is heaven and the land. And so the destruction of heaven and the land is the destruction of Israel in 70 AD. And so Adam is not the first human being. Adam is the first covenant man that was plucked out of humanity. God makes a covenant. He exiles him, which is just a recapitulation of the story of the exodus of Israel, Egypt, and the land plucked out, brought into the and all that kind of stuff and everything and so forth and so on. So, so that you get to 70 AD, you can see that this is very elaborate, and and it is. It's this is a quite elaborate. To get to 70 AD. So you start with 70 AD as the truth, and then you go back and you reread the entire Bible now in that light and reinterpret the entire Bible in the light of 70 AD fulfillment. That's full preterism. And they applied it to Genesis 1 through 3. So is that going to have any difference in the way that you read Genesis? Well, we're going to be two ships passing in the night. We don't have anything in common at this point now. We're just sailing on two different ships. And yet, we're all evangelical Christians. And see, that's when this stuff started coming around, that's when my break began to happen. I thought, this is getting, I mean, we don't know what body is. We don't know what death is. We don't know what sanctification means. We don't know what resurrection means. And now we don't even know what creation means. We don't know what it is.
Well,
So
it's
interesting because
more terminology.
So that's what happens. So now the whole game has changed. The whole ball game's changed with this book here. And one of your, I guess, Jeremiah's Baptist minister friends, Zach Davis, who was a dear friend with Jeremiah, is now running a full preterist church. And he's the new darling. And he's now adopted this. He's bought hook, line, and sinker. He's bought the whole farm. But why not? You know, if the church has been wrong for 1900 years on the return of the Lord, maybe they're wrong about the Trinity and the Bible and creation. Maybe they're. I mean, that's everything. That's the ball game, you know. But anyway,
I have to admit that I can't come into this conversation from a scholarly perspective in regard to any form of preterism. I understand basically what it is, but man, Sam, you bring such a wealth of knowledge to this, and so I can't bring that, but I think I can bring what I try to bring every time I have an opportunity to be on the show is kind of a practical, real world understanding of why people like to believe things like this. And I see it a lot. There's a reoccurrence recently in this idea of mysticism. Now, I'm not saying that mysticism and preterism are the same thing. I'm saying that they have similar roots. Mysticism in the church is huge. You know, God told me this, and I'm not even talking about, I'm talking about like, you know, independent Baptist churches. I'm talking about Reformed churches. This language is there. They're not saying that they received visions or anything like that, but it's this language of God told me I needed to do this, and God gave me peace, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of overlap with that and this desire to be able to completely wrap our hands around the scriptures and claim that we understand it all. But that understanding requires so much spiritualization, so much symbolism, so much interpreting things that the scriptures have written as that was historical fact, this is a literal fulfillment, whatever the case may be, and seeing it as something it's not. And I just warn everybody. I warn myself as an independent fundamental Baptist, a dispensational. I warn everyone here. I warn everyone in the chat that it's very easy for us, because we are so limited and so impotent, to want to get our hands around certain portions of scripture, the entirety of scripture, and really be like, I understand this. Oh yes, I get how this over here and that over there. And there's that tendency to take the scriptures and to play loose and fast with it and to twist it and want to see things that aren't there. And the next thing we know, we're slipping into mysticism. We're slipping into preterism. We're believing that all of them have been, we're slipping into those guys I was debating, not debating, but I was debating with last week, who was also saying that, you know, no, the sin isn't a thing anymore. Because look at all these verses that say that, you know, Christians don't sin and so on and so forth. And it's just something that we slip into. And here's my encouragement for everybody. If you are not comfortable with the paradoxical tensions of the scripture, then you're not comfortable with God. Because God is beyond our ability to understand. God, if we could understand him, he wouldn't be God, we would be God. So if you just find yourself so uncomfortable with a passage that you have to run to the internet, and the first thing that just seems like, oh, it kind of makes sense, you're like, oh, okay, that must be what it is. You're going to be in a dangerous, dangerous place. We need to appreciate the fact that God is communicative. He does want us to understand him, but there's a limit to that understanding. There really is. And there will be things in the scripture that in eternity we will be learning about the Bible, and we'll be going, wow, I would never would have understood that. We see Christ, we see other portions of where portions of the Old Testament are taken and applied to things in the New Testament, that if it hadn't been written in the New Testament, there's not a theological scholar on the planet who would have ever known there was a connection between those two events. We never would have known. God had to tell us that. So be okay with that tension. Be okay with that level of discomfort and pursue it. Pursue knowing God, pursue knowing his word. That would be my encouragement to us all.
Good. No.
Yeah.
Because I had, you got my post-millennial brothers, my premillennial brothers, my dispensational, you're bringing something to the table, an angle that I might be missing over here. A little angle, little nugget I could pick up off of that and then utilize it. Like, yeah, let me shift that around here a little bit. But we're within that bound of those we were talking earlier of these fundamental where we all agree. These are our limits. We're not going to go beyond these. But it is interesting, and it's an interesting thing about cults that they go outside the bounds, and they want you to have an open mind and all that, but they have a stranglehold on the absolute truth that they have, and they've got it all figured out. So does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's like they go out
all the time,
and they've got it all figured out, and so now you're like in this really tight system. You can't get out of it.
Yeah, they're allowed to take dogmatic statements other people have made and completely apply them and reinterpret them in different ways, but they don't allow anyone to take their dogmatic statements and do the opposite, which the Bible has a fun word for. It's called hypocrisy, and we all need to be careful of that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, and I say this all the time when dealing with cults, and people have to recognize that every system has a solution to their problems. They will work a way to make it. They'll come up with some life-saving device to save the system. And it could be the most bizarre thing. And the example I give, and Sam, this will be new to you, but some in the audience probably has heard this, even though I haven't told this story for several years probably by now. But so I had a guy contact the ministry, Jewish guy. He knows that I'm from a Jewish background, wants to convert me back to Judaism. And so he asked whether I would be willing to meet him and have some dinner. Okay. So he makes the argument that only the rabbis can answer the difficult questions of the Bible. Okay, what questions? So here was the thing. He said, well, David was a man after God's own heart. So David could not have sinned. Now, okay, I get, we all see a problem there, but he says, so David couldn't have killed Uriah and couldn't have had an adulterous affair with Bathsheba. Yeah. And so what do they, so this is a dilemma that the rabbis themselves create, so then they are the only ones with a solution. And so the solution was that what happened was Uriah was going off to war, and they would have two forms of divorce, a permanent divorce and a temporary divorce. And so this temporary divorce was in case they didn't come home, so that the wife wasn't destitute. She could remarry someone if he doesn't, and just assume he's dead. And so Uriah gave Bathsheba a permanent divorce. And therefore, when Uriah comes back and is invited back, the reason David asked for him to come back was because David knew he wouldn't go back to his home to sleep with his ex-wife because they're not married anymore. And that's why he stayed with the dogs and didn't go to his home. And so, which makes no sense that, it's like, okay. And that's why he helped him get a little drunk and kept him over the next night, right? No. So you say, well, then why did he have Uriah killed if Uriah is such a righteous man? Oh, because Uriah called David Lord, and that's blasphemy.
Yeah.
Wait, but the word Lord, it was not the word for Yahweh. It was the word he would use for a king, right? And so they will, no matter what answer I came up with, they find a way to save the system. And that's what I find here is that all this twisting of words and language, and we'll take this literal, but now the same passage will take figurative, whatever we have to save the system.
It sounds very Talmudic. They go great elaborations just on a very simple point, but huge elaborations.
If you want to be the only person with the solution, you have to be the person who created the problem. And that's exactly, Andrew, what you're describing. They create this problem that only they can solve, but it's only the only reason that the problem exists and needing solution is the fact that they created it in the first place. Because otherwise, that passage is very easy to understand.
Yeah. Well, and you know, if you read, Dr. Jason Lyle has a book, the Ultimate Proof of Creation, where he talks about life-saving devices and gives examples of them and shows how people do that. Let me get to some of the other comments that Drew starred here. This will be a quick one. Kathy was asking you the question, is Gary DeMar a full preterist? So he's changed his views. So she's asking whether he is now a full preterist.
So we got together with a few of us leaders in the Reformed community, whatever, because we were noticing a drift of Gary DeMar's, he was drifting over. And he spoke at our conferences when I was a full preterist and spoke at these conferences. So Gary would show up and be invited and he would accept, which I don't guilt by association. I don't have any issues. I'll speak at an atheist conference if I'm invited. I'm forced the atheist, but yeah, I'll show up. You want me to talk?
I was invited to speak. I don't know how, but I was invited to speak at a flat Earth convention.
If you're paying my fare and paying.
Well, I've always said, hey, as long as you're not going to restrict me. So they asked me what my topic would be, and I said I would love to speak on why the Earth must be a sphere, and I never heard back from them. I don't know why.
The head explodes.
Like, I don't know where they got my name to invite me to such a thing, but it was like, okay, hey, if you're going to have me speak, I'll be happy to.
So Gary was asked years ago, would you ever condemn full preterism as heresy? And absolutely not. No. So he's very clear on that. I think that they're, wrong on some few issues, and these issues need to be studied out. And I've known Gary, it's the way he kind of talks, they need to study this out. We need to see, and I'm no expert, yeah, you've been writing books since the 1990s, but whatever. You figure after a couple of decades, they're called doctors, people, that study stuff for 20 years. Gotta be an expert there, kind of, so, but anyway, I'm still studying it, still looking at it. So that's his evasive kind of way. And that was starting to bother, God forbid that it bothers us. I guess we're not supposed to be bent out of shape or whatever. But so we confronted, because we were hearing on his podcasts and different interviews, we were hearing things that when you die, you get your body in heaven. And I thought, oh, red flag right there. When you die, you get your body in heaven. That's the view within full preterism that alleviates the resurrection of the dead. When we die, we get our body in heaven, and heaven is the new heavens and new earth kind of thing. So that's the route they go on. And, we really need to look at what Paul's saying about what body means. It could be a corporate body. And so clearly he's exploring, but yet he's a teacher. And not only that, I've been reading Gary DeMar's stuff since the late 1980s. I've got some of his original stuff that goes back to 89 and 90, 91. So he has been very influential in the Reformed premillennial or postmillennial, Reformed Baptist postmillennial. He's been very influential in that world, in his writings and all of that kind of stuff. So, and theocracy and Reconstructionism and all that. So for him to come down and say that as full preterist, that opens that door up. You see, you remember at the beginning of the thing I was talking about legitimacy? See, that just cracks that door open, because Gary DeMar is no slouch. So that cracks that door open and saying, see, Gary accepts us, and that lets us in. And I'm wanting to shut the door. Just no, I'm not. You can't come in here. That's really the issue. So then we ask him, do you believe in the end of history? Do you believe in the resurrection, bodily resurrection of the dead, and the bodily return of the Lord? And he did not answer. He said these things are not as defined as what you think that they are in the scriptures, and they need further study. And that's where he's at now. Now, is he a full preterist? No, he's still operating under a post-millennial global evangelism kind of a thing, and eventually, help me out here. This Christianization of civilization and merging and all of that, and it's going to take however long that's going to take. So he still has that going on, which is the fulfillment of prophecy as postmillennialists understand these things, which is I have empathy with that and understand it. So that wouldn't make him a full preterist. However, if everything is fulfilled in 70 AD and now being applied he's trying to answer the post 70 AD problem, and that's where he gets stuck. He's stuck. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. He doesn't know how to. He has no end of history. There may be one. It's that really indifferent, evasive kind of thing where Gary's at, which I would call full preterism. So yes, I would say Gary is a full preterist.
Okay.
More or less. If that makes sense.
Does he call himself one now? Does he call himself a full preterist right now or no?
No, he will not. Yeah. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this. I don't believe in that.
Okay.
And then he said, but you said you get a new body in heaven. Well, I'm looking at the issue.
Yeah, well, that's always good to.
And stop saying stuff. Then stop teaching. Stop teaching.
Well, for folks who are regular here, if they remember back when Godless Grandma came in, that was her tactic. Everything. She would come up with an argument, and every time you answered it, I don't really know about that. I'm not. I haven't studied that.
Yeah.
And the classic in there was the part that I don't know. Maybe I should play it, but the classic was when she brought up the issue of that Christians, like the danger of Christianity was that we were not taking vaccines and people were dying because of COVID. Mm-hmm. She brought it up, and then like 6 minutes later, I'm saying to her, I'm like, I gave her 6 minutes of me and Drew giving her answers to the COVID vaccine. To which she gets frustrated and says, I'm not prepared to talk about that. That wasn't supposed to be a topic. You bring these things up and you throw it at me. And I'm like, you brought it up, Kelly. And she's like, I did not. Well, okay, maybe I did.
I'd like to meet Godless Grandma. I like the name, though. That's a good.
Oh, she's a character.
She was an interesting, that was fun. So let me put some more of the comments here. We got special.
My brother
says special thanks to Dr. Frost for sharing his knowledge and expertise on the subject. It's been an honor working with him and learning from him. God bless.
You're going to make my head really big.
Well, then we got this. Well, so I'm just going to read this as it is, and I mean, I'll just Haps Addison says, what full pretty view on community and baptism? Now, I did say if there was ever any evidence I could buy of Bigfoot, there it is, and even his English would fit the way if Bigfoot could speak.
I'm really sad to say I think I can interpret this, and I don't know if I should be proud of myself.
Translation here.
Yeah, I think he's saying, what is full preterism's view on communion and baptism?
Okay,
that's my guess. That's my guess. That's not it, Haps. I'm sorry. What's full preterism's view on communion and baptism?
That makes way more sense now. I didn't know what community meant.
Yeah.
As a biblical counselor, I have to interpret a lot of stuff that I get verbally and written, and I think that's my best guess.
We will have to see if Hap says that's right. But okay, let's go with that. What would be full preterism's view on communion and baptism?
33 ascension to 70 AD. No longer applicable. Simple as that.
Really? So
you do show forth the Lord's death until he came. Well, he came. Yeah, well, you don't need to do that anymore. Same with baptism. Baptism, like Mike Sullivan would argue that baptism that was a Jewish thing from the transition generation, from the Jewish Old Covenant to the in Christ New Covenant transitional generation, from ascension of Christ to 70 AD. Baptism was a symbolic gesture of getting out of that old covenant, coming into the new covenant. But now that we're fully in the new covenant, new heavens and new earth, take it or leave it.
Okay, so kind of along the same lines, then maybe Kathy is asking the question: what does 1 Corinthians 11:26.
Yeah, that's it.
Whenever you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. So I guess it'd be a similar thing there.
Yeah, the church has been wrong on that too.
According to them, yeah. So Darren Steed says, excellent topic. Wish I had gotten here sooner. Well, that's your own fault, Darren. You know we always start 8 o'clock Eastern time. You should just be here. You should be here at 7:30, in fact. Actually, I'm going to tell you this. I got a private message sent to me, Sam. I'm going to just read this. Someone says to me, what sovereign timing for this conversation? I've just got a friend, I got a friend who just came over and told me on Monday that he's gone full preterist. And he and I are supposed to have a talk soon.
Wow.
So
Get a hold of me.
yeah, so
Email me.
Can I give you your email?
I get a lot of emails, probably 3 or 4 a week of that very kind of thing. I get a lot of emails. Churches, church pastors, elders. We've had to operate some excommunications because the people were just being very, very, very divisive. They wouldn't go away. And I'm like, that's just disruptive. Look, if I'm going to a dispensationalist church, I'm not going to go in there proclaiming I'm going to respect it's just respect. It's just common courtesy. Don't do that. So that just tells me something about you right there. When you start doing that kind of stuff, it's like,
Yeah.
know where you're at and read a room. And so a lot of these guys are very disruptive. And you said, you did a lot of counseling and stuff in psychology. What's the reasoning behind that? Because you think you've got the truth and everybody needs to hear it.
Yeah. Well, we all believe what we believe, and we believe it passionately. And as Christians, we try to take everything that we believe back to biblical command, back to biblical truth. And so it's the same thing that happened to the fundamentalists in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And I think to a large degree, some of them still today. There's, not understanding the degrees of separation, not understanding that there are certain things you absolutely must separate from somebody over, and certain things that it's okay that they believe differently than you. It's okay that they dress differently than you. But it's really what it is pride and arrogance. It's arrogance that I am right. I cannot be wrong on this subject. You have to be wrong on this subject. And if that's the case, if there's no wiggle room for you to potentially be right or for there to be liberty in this, then I have to convince you that you're wrong. And I'm going to take every opportunity I can to do that.
Yeah. So another thing we got, Claude Ramsey says, y'all should check out one of the more recent debates with Dr. Frost we did a review on it. So I asked him where to find that review. And if you're on YouTube, it's the Here I Stand podcast. Huh?
And the best. I mean, there's Ward Finley, who says I don't sin anymore. He's perfect. And we had fun with that one. William Bell, who's been around for a long 30 years. He's with Don Preston. William Bell's like one of the pioneers, I think. But anyway, it's all on YouTube. Yep.
Yeah. I don't want to misrepresent you, Sam. Somebody was saying in the chat that they thought that you were saying that we don't need to take the Lord's Supper anymore. I said I believe that you were speaking from the perspective of the preterist. Was that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Very big believer in Eucharist and the Lord. Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, we need the Lord's table.
Okay.
And baptism.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Claude, the review that Claude did of your debate that he's referring to is
you find that
Here I Stand Theology podcast, and it is Here I Stand Theology podcast with Frost.
Donnie Badinsky's stuff, who I really appreciate. Donnie.
Now I'm going to say I don't know what's going to happen with this, but Claude sent this to me and asked for me to show this on screen if I could find it. Let's see. Oh, I think I have to. Let's see. It doesn't let me do just the.
I'd end up erasing the entire program if I was doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, he sent it to me as a picture, so I gotta pull it up as a picture because there's just a problem when you share. You can't share stuff in with StreamYard, it just doesn't let me share as a so here it doesn't let me share from the texts. So here he wants this. Maybe you can explain this. What in the world is this?
Oh my gosh.
It says, but whatever, Dr. Sam Frost.
He sent me a shirt. That was the shirt. I get this package in the mail, and I'm like, "What is this, Claude Rance?" And that's the shirt, and I wear that because in the debate, there's a part where I said, "Yeah, but whatever," and that just hit him, and he thought I got to make a shirt, and he sent me a shirt. That's my picture on it.
So we get back to again. You have friends that like to give you gifts.
Yeah, I get these gifts and stuff. People send me things. But that was one of them, and I loved the shirt. And people don't understand it at all. They think I have a big inflated ego, and I probably I don't know.
Yeah. So what
do you say about ego? What do you say? So if you 20 years pastoral, you've got experience 20 years, 25 years, 30. So you've been around the block, and you're still in the field. You're still doing the work and all this other stuff. How do you? And I deal with this a lot because I work also cognitive behavioral therapy. I teach that in the Henry County Correctional Facility here. So this idea of humbling yourself and walking humbly, but yet at the same time, have you accomplished anything, and are you supposed to talk about them?
Well,
or you're so full of yourself. It's like, well, not necessarily. You can be humble, and
there's a big difference between confidence and pride.
Yeah, confidence.
And people want to attribute confidence. If I'm an expert in a field and I know how to do that and I'm confident, doesn't mean that I'm prideful about it. Now I could be prideful about it.
Well, arrogant. There's a difference.
Correct.
Yeah. The other side of that is, and I know you want to transition, Andrew, but the other side of this is a huge thing that people misunderstand, that to speak honestly about oneself is not prideful. I've talked to individuals, I won't go into the whole story, but basically they would almost rather deceive. When asked about what they do, they would rather so downplay what they do almost to make it seem meaningless, so that they don't come across sounding prideful when all they're doing is just giving the honest answer about what it is they do in their life, And I think that the church, a lot of churches in particular, have gotten this idea of humility, that you can't ever say anything nice about yourself. You can't ever, even if it's just an accurate statement, lest you be prideful or come across as prideful, and that's not biblical.
Yeah. So let me just put this.
There's your next book. That's a book. I hear this all the time. So you get these degrees, and I don't care. The degrees are because I like reading, and someone said, you like reading so much, you might as well get some degrees while you're at it. I'm like, well, okay. But it's not but if I bring them up, especially in some circles of the church, it's like, well, that's just man-made degrees. That ain't cut. And I don't know how to respond. It's like, man, I'm not trying to be prideful. But I thank God that I did go through seminary. I'm very thankful for the people that I met and the professors and the whole experience. It was a real mind stretching. I got stretched and grew, and
you learn a lot. You go into seminary thinking you have all the answers. You come out with going, all I got is questions, right? So,
questions. Yeah.
But it's good. You mentioned for Aaron, that's his next book, because obviously Aaron, Sam's been checking you out because he knows that you finally wrote your first book, which is, I got in my hand right here.
Oh, let me write that down.
Quit: How to Stop Family Strife for Good by A.M. Brewster.
Wow. That's a bold claim.
And what's really hilarious about it is that with a title like that, it's 100 pages long. So not only is it going to stop family strife for good, but it's going to do it succinctly.
Yeah, it's going to do it quickly. All right. So let us, I know we don't have a lot of time, but let us bring someone back from the dead. Lazarus is here.
What?
Oh, hi. What's up? I'm back from the dead, and I'm here to say full preterism is nonsense.
I've been there.
I
I've
don't
been there.
think we're
done
going to
that.
debate that with him.
Lazarus
You win
almost
the debate.
single-handedly
Yeah.
destroyed an entire Facebook full preterist room. He almost single-handedly destroyed the entire.
So
Yeah, I've got my ways.
or Lance, your name's Lance, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, you can call me whatever.
Okay,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's fine.
Whatever.
You want to go by? So whatever. You work with Sam. That's what I do on the street. When I'm on the street doing
Oh, yeah.
evangelism, I want to get someone's name so I could be respectful to them, and they'll give me something like whatever, or you don't need to know. I go, well, that's a funny name, but if that's what your mom called you, okay, so you don't need to know. I got a question for you, and I keep doing that till they get so
I
frustrated.
was
They finally
actually trying to do the meme. I was trying to make that funny meme that he just got earlier, where it said "okay, whatever," but didn't work too well. But yeah, y'all can call me Lance. It's fine.
So
But
you work
yeah,
with Sam.
I work
what I
with,
gather,
I've
you
been
have questions
working
or
with Sam
comments?
Frost. Yes.
Lance
Yes,
was a
I've
former
been working with
preterist.
Sam
I've known him for what, 20 years now? 20 years? So he was a full preterist.
Yeah, that's
back
probably
in the
about
day.
right. That's crazy. I've known Sam for a long time now. It's kind of wow. You didn't think
Yeah,
a snowman could
been
live
that
that
long?
long?
Yeah, it was that long.
Yeah.
And he went to a few conferences. So there used to be a lot of conferences from 2003 to 2008. There was probably like 4 or 5 a year. And then that died down. Now you're getting, I think, Don Preston's Preterist Pilgrim Weekend. You have David Curtis, the Berean Bible, and then Zach Davis here. Here's this guy coming in again. Is starting to have. So they're starting to kind of sort of ramp up again. At least they're trying to get them to ramp up. But ever since Zoom and COVID, conferences are really, really hard to put together. They're hard to do.
They are. So Lance, we got about 8 minutes left in the show. Any comments that you wanted to add or help out with to discuss?
I just wanted to say, like, the implications of full preterism really kick their butts all the time. So, like, William Bell's trying to deny it now, but he's a full preterist, and he goes into this whole deal now where his followers are like, "Oh, polygamy is great. Polygyny, we can all do that." And I'm like, okay, so since everything's fulfilled, sin was ended in 70 AD, can y'all marry whoever you want, do whatever you want? And they're like, yeah, of course, and then you get William Bell, and he's like, no, that's not right. But then, like, why are your followers saying that then, bud? Like, that's crazy. And same thing happens with Don Preston. Like, you have this all the time where, like, there's like this disconnect from the leader, from the actual follower, and then, like, but it's all a cult tactic, because me and Sam Frost, when we were full preterists, they were saying the same stuff to us all the time. But now when they get exposed for it, now it's like, oh well, I'm just a good old boy, and I'm in the good old boy club, and you got to listen to us. Polygamy is not acceptable, but then they'll tell you it's okay later. Frost has had similar experiences on this, so
yeah. You get back to what,
but I think they've gotten worse.
Talking about earlier, we were talking about this double speak that goes on.
Yeah.
Within these real stranglehold kind of views. That's what I love. We've got so many variations of views, eschatology, but there's this bound. But then, you get into this my debate with Ward Finley, where he couldn't. Do you still sin? No. Now, do I still make mistakes?
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
oh wow, really? He went that route. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was going to say this earlier, but
I've had that too, though, in conversation.
Yeah.
I was going to say earlier, we have
it's like, okay,
different views, right? Sam, you're an on-mill. Drew, you're post-mill. I'm pre-mill. All we needed was Dr. James White, because then we could have had one person who was all three in one.
That's right.
Because he held to all three views at one point or another. but yeah, I think
was raised Foursquare Gospel dispensational premill. I mean, that was 1970s. So I'm 57, so I was in the early 70s on throughout. So I was raised that way, and then post-millennial, I was that way for many, many years in Bible college and afterwards. Full preterist, and then swing back, and now I'm all millennial.
Yeah. So let me
have empathy for all. I have great. That's why I'm not. That's not a separable issue.
Yeah. So let me I'm going to do this one comment, and then Dr. Frost, I'm going to have you let folks know how to get a hold of you. But Wesley Roberts says this: I love seeing guys who met at the conference last year in each other's shows. True fellowship and community in the body of Christ. I met Andrew, Aaron, and Sam at the conference and talked to each of you guys. It was a great time. And Andrew, thanks for the books. So he's speaking of the Why Calvinism conference that we had down. That's where we had all met. And it was a great time of fellowship. So let me just wrap this up by, asking.
I think I was the only Presbyterian there. There might have been two of us. I don't know.
No, there were definitely two because Greg Moore, who is the MC of the event, is a Presbyterian.
Right. He was Presbyterian.
And
hey,
how sweet!
I just saw that.
Yeah, for those who are not watching live, Aaron just had somebody, whether wife or daughter. I couldn't quite see. It was a daughter. I assumed that, but I couldn't really see too well because it was kind of quick. I was reading comment, and
that might be the "it's time to get off" kiss.
Yeah, that was
that was I'm going to bed, Daddy.
I'm going to bed now.
So Sam, let folks know how they could get a hold of you if there's people that do end up having questions, do want to maybe like this friend of mine, Chris, who is going, hey, I'm going to be having these conversations. I'll share with him, privately your email if it's okay with since you said that.
Fine, that's good.
But how can folks?
Yeah, my email Samuel M as in Mother Samuel M Frost at yahoo.com. And then any more today, because after 8 years of doing this debates, and so just Google my name, Samuel Frost Preterism, and just everything will show up. But my blog is vigil vigil.blog, and that's where all my stuff is really at. And then I'm on Facebook with Lazarus Lance, demolition crew there. So, and a lot of full preterist stuff is on. Without Facebook, full preterism would lose a massive tentacle if there was no Facebook, because that's it would. And I see that they're starting to go on, Andrew, as you said, check out this Twitter. So I don't go on Twitter a lot. I should more, but I don't. But
what you said about Facebook, though, is true for liberalism as well.
Because they don't know how to use it.
They know how to use. They've been on there. They've got a presence on Facebook.
What I end up seeing is they just, as I said in the beginning, right? One jumps in and must share it with the others because they come in a group, and then they talk to each other. Like, you don't need to be there. They're going to be patting each other on the back for things they say, as if they really nailed somebody by ignoring what they actually said and making up you really said this. No, I didn't. In fact, it was almost like who was it that's being at the confirmation? I can't remember if it was RFK Jr. or one of them where they were asked a question. I think it was RFK Jr. and it was like, do you deny vaccines? And he says, no, I don't. Yes, you do.
It's that kind of yes. Yeah. And people play that game. Yes and no questions. Don Preston does that. Yes and no question a lot.
Hey, listen, in the flesh, if a group of guys is going to try to convince me that I can't sin, that I can make all of these choices and do all of these things, and I don't have future judgment and whatever else. Man, oh man, in the flesh, I want that. Like,
yeah,
of course, So, yeah, the more opportunity they have to get in front of the biggest group of people who are looking for reasons to excuse their lifestyle. That they're always going to have an audience.
Yeah. When I'm finished with this show here, I'm gonna. So when I'm done with the show here, I'm gonna go hit my crack pipe.
Did you hear that, Kathy? Did you hear that, Kathy? He denies communion, and he's gonna go his crack pipe.
Because I don't sin anymore. It's great.
That's for you. That's false for you, man. I mean, come on.
Well, that's a great way to end the show.
But you confront him on that kind. So Lazarus he's repeatedly. So can I go smoke crack now? And they're well, no, that's not. Well, why not?
I've asked them.
Why not?
I've asked them so much times. Why can't I do this? They're like, oh, that's terrible. Why? I'm like, why? Why is it terrible?
Well,
Like,
so Lance, we had a guy that came in here, an Indian guy who believed he was a sinless. He never sinned. He was basically teaching Gnosticism. And so I went with the classic Gnostical argument that, can you sleep with a prostitute? Would that be a sin? Here's the clip from that episode.
Are you saying that a believer can go sleep with a prostitute and it wouldn't be right or wrong because he's not under the law anymore? So if he sleeps with a prostitute but has faith in doing it, then it's okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, I want to make sure that I heard you correctly.
Yeah, it's okay.
It would be as long as you have faith.
He can do that.
He can.
Faith.
Wow. Okay. You're saying that as long as we have faith, whatever we do in faith is not sin.
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go.
That guy was wild.
See, this is what I want to ask Don Preston and Mike Sullivan, but they're too scared to debate me and Frost. So
yeah, they will.
So Andrew, what you should have asked him was, is it okay for me to kill you?
Yeah.
See what he says about that. Would that be okay?
Obviously, in the full preterist paradigm, yeah.
Well,
if you do it in faith,
but that would reveal the hypocrisy.
Go for Andrew.
Well, see,
for Andrew.
Aaron, you're missing the point, though. As long as we're over, technology like this, they're going to say it's fine. It's when we're in person holding a gun that they might disagree, right?
Have you been seeing Greg's posts? Greg just came on. Have you been seeing what he's been putting in there?
Post that. So Greg Moore from Dead Man Walking podcast goes,
"Oh,
Greg, what did I miss? Prostitutes and crack pipes." He says, "Geez, I got to go back and listen to the rest of the show." Yes, you do.
Yeah, that's right.
Buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up. But hey, this was a great show, Sam. It's always great having you on. It is always so informative. I mean, I thought I really understood full preterism the last time you were on, and there was like so much more that you got into. I'm like, okay, that's just different. So anytime you want to come on, if you ever have someone that wants to debate you, we could do it here. I know, same with you, Lance. I know there was a bunch of people on Twitter. They were willing to debate until we mentioned Sam's name, and then they all ran. And
Mike Sullivan being one of them, he just won.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
So for the record,
Lance is mean. I don't want to debate him.
Yeah. For the record, you see that scrolling at the bottom, we have during the entire show an invitation for anyone to join apologeticslive.com. You just go there, you click on the duck icon, the StreamYard, and you can join the discussion. We've been asking for the full preterists to come. We posted this is going to be there. None of them showed up.
Huh.
And I think what we see is that they do very good when they're in the echo chamber, not so good when they actually have to answer questions. So here's an appeal to any full preterists. If you would like to come on here, we got Sam Frost, we have Lance, we have Jeremiah from the Apologetic Dog. If you want to debate any one of them, I think they'd all be happy for the debate. And so come on, just contact me, email me, info@strivingforeternity.com, info@strivingforeternity.com, and we can set up a formal debate. Since your view is so undeniable, we think you should be willing to come in here.
Should be able to kick the butt.
Yeah.
Should be able to come in. It should be, as I said to the one person, if Sam is so bad at debate, you should want to do it.
In my place.
Yeah. So that is the challenge.
You should be able to totally melt that snowman.
Yeah.
Melt. Yeah.
Annihilate. You can annihilate Frost.
Melt the snowman.
But until they come in,
Kick his
I'm going to
butt,
just
melt
say
the
that
snowman.
my position is that until they come in, they can't even defend their own view. And that's why I think they're not here. But hey,
I agree.
maybe someone will prove me wrong. I did the debate with the black Hebrew Israelite by debating an empty chair, and it actually brought a black Hebrew Israelite that came and debated me, which was great. That's what we wanted. The funnier thing with that was that, Sam, how you've won a debate? It's when everybody who agrees with the person, like in this case, it was the black Hebrew Israelite. I had a whole bunch of black Hebrew Israelites tell me that guy didn't do a good job. That's how you know you won.
I've actually heard that with the full preterist debates where he didn't do a very represent us.
Yeah. Someone else would really
Yeah.
defeat Sam Frost, but that guy didn't do it. Or that guy didn't. Well, folks, if you think you could do a better job, come on in, and we'd love to host that debate. Next week, I think we're going to do an open Q&A. So if you guys got your questions, email me, info@strivingforeternity.com, because a couple weeks ago, Drew and Tom took care of a lot of the questions we had in the backlog.
Yeah,
so
that was a fun one.
They're fun ones. I was glad you had fun with those. And so if you guys want to have some questions answered, we prefer for folks to come on in, but we will be doing that next week. So just remember, until then, to strive to make today an eternal day for the glory of God. We'll see you next time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.